2325. We're based out of Oviedo, Texas, or Oviedo High School. That's our team from last year. Currently, we have 7 members. We're excited to be here with you all today.
You may notice the QR codes in the upcoming slides. If you would use those to access our podcast to get a better idea of what we're talking about, you are free to do so, and we highly encourage it.
Today we're going to be talking about just in general tools for you to use on your podcast: logos, brand, marketing, social media, finding guests, and finding your audience. There are 3 key factors that influence perception of your outreach. You should aim to connect with a broad audience, provide them with valuable skill, keep them engaged, and spark their interest in pursuing other programs. Okay. So to figure out what you have to focus on, you have to define who's in your audience. So for us, we live in a fairly rural area, west of Fort Worth. You also figure out what the aim range is you're looking for. So I don't exactly know the statistics for that.
I would say elementary to high school students.
Yeah. And then what platform are you using for your podcast and marketing? So we're using Spotify, and I think it's just Spotify, right?
Yeah. We were using Google for podcasters, but they are shutting down as I think it was last month they shut down. They may have extended it, I'm not sure, but we are not able to use Google for podcasters anymore. Okay, so now we're going to get into where to begin with a podcast. So let's take a little trip to the history of what a podcast is. Initially referred to as audio blogs in the 1980s, the iPod played a pivotal role in the rise of podcasting in late 2004. That same year, Dave Weiner and Adam Curry developed the iPodder, the first device tailored specifically for podcast listening. By 2006, Steve Jobs showcased the process of creating a podcast by using Apple's podcast software. Fast forward to 2024, and the podcasting industry is projected to generate $4.02 billion. That's right, $1 billion. With 41% of Americans having listened to a podcast in the past month. Knowing this, we now can shift to finding tools for your podcast. Our audio recording and editing process involves using DaVinci Resolve, Screencastify, and we use a HyperX SoloCast microphone for our podcasts. We prefer to use DaVinci Resolve as it serves as a cost-effective substitute for Premiere Flow, which is costly under the Adobe suite. But you're welcome to choose any of the hardware and software that suits your needs. Now let's move to logos and branding. I suggest your podcast always have a mission. For example, our team's mission is as ambassadors for FIRST. As ambassadors for FIRST, our goal is to influence STEM education in our schools. You can also use FIRST core values to identify your mission to further influence your reach to FIRST professionals and teams. Establishing a strong brand is very crucial for your team's marketing, particularly when it comes to outreach events such as podcasting. Aim for logos that are not only clear and easy to read, but also reflect your team's personality, as I've used up here with our team colors in our podcasting thumbnail. This approach will not only help you stand out by brand recognition. Let's talk about marketing. Marketing strategies significantly influence your growth as a team with your podcast. To kick off your marketing efforts, it is essential to identify a core audience, typically consisting of FIRST professionals and teams. Also, your reach with your podcast will also affect your community. Like our community is the greater area of Lido, Benbrook, and Hudson Oaks. Social media. Engaging with Facebook groups such as FIRST Network and FIRST Provides can boost your podcast visibility among your target audience. Additionally, incorporating QR codes printed on our slides is an excellent method to promote and advertise your podcast to a wider audience. Like you may have noticed, some of our business cards with little QR codes for our podcast were placed upon your desks, I call them, for you to scan and check out our Instagram. Okay, social media to continue. The role of social media cannot be overstated in marketing you and your podcast. The platform you choose to utilize your podcast can significantly impact your outreach. I strongly suggest starting with podcasting platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as they are the two major players in the podcasting world. They host vast audiences that are very eager to discover new STEM content about you and your team. While you can certainly expand to other platforms later, beginning with these two can get you off on the right foot. Additionally, creating a Facebook or Instagram page for your podcast is highly suggested, as this is another tool for marketing. This will enable you to implement various marketing strategies and connect with teams and various professionals beyond your immediate circle. For instance, recently we have collaborated from teams from San Francisco and Brazil. Crazy. These methods will help promote your podcast by reaching audiences nationally and internationally. Since we are talking about social media, it is very pertinent that we talk about safety on social media as well. Privacy has never been more important, especially in the age where everything that you do can be showcased online. If you have not reviewed or modified your privacy settings on either your Instagram accounts or your Facebook accounts, make sure you or an adult have access to these so you are both on the same page on what is going on. Check your social media privacy settings. Contact risks. So when you are contacting a team or a professional, make sure to check their profile and go through the post to make sure they are who they say they are. There are a lot of hacked accounts that go around, and you want to make sure you are contacting the right person at all times. If something does not feel right, contact either a trusted adult or your FTC, FLL, or FRC coach. Okay, moving on. Now we are moving on to securing guests for your podcast. Securing guests for your podcast is crucial to its success. The choice of guests can open a wide variety of questions for you to ask. For example, when interviewing public officials such as mayors or school superintendents, you may delve into topics such as the future of STEM education, as demonstrated in our podcast conversation with Dr. Bone, the superintendent of Aledo High School, as shown on the keyboard. Okay, next, you can find an episode by scanning QR code. Another category of guests is first leaders and volunteers, like Mr. Cherry Holmes. It is essential to showcase their experience within FIRST so that you can greatly convey your impact on your FIRST community. Lastly, featuring a team on your podcast allows you to spotlight their unique attributes, whether it's outreach or engineering or coding, mentorship programs, or technical skills. One such interview you can listen to with our podcast to showcase this is Plano West Robotics Group. Now, identifying your core audience. It is crucial for your podcast, second only to securing guests. Focus on topics that align with STEM, particularly those connected with FIRST and its core values and initiatives, whenever possible. It is also vital to keep your team informed about the podcast progress. Encourage them to not only share your podcast, but listen to it on a daily basis to keep up with what your team and your efforts have been doing this past season. This strategy can help you cultivate a varied audience across many different demographics. According to this slide, we currently have 662 impressions, meaning that 662 individuals have viewed our podcast. Now, since we passed out these cards, let's see how much marketing has really happened. So I'm going to check these in real time, and we have had a total of 674 impressions on our podcast. That is a 12 impression jump, which doesn't sound like a lot, but over a long period of time, this can really boost your podcast in the FIRST community. pitfalls that your team may have that you may want to actively avoid. So, not getting your team involved in their podcast. Always make sure you and your team are on the same page when it comes to outreach events, engineering, just anything. Make sure you are all on the same page. Communication with podcasts are, you want to make sure your team knows what you're actively going out and seeking out guests. Like if you're interviewing your school superintendent, you want all of your team to know so they can support you. Time management. This is very important. It's very understated, but it's very important. You need to know when, not only when your podcasts are, how long they're gonna last, and how long you need to take to edit that podcast episode and bring it to the table, Spotify, Apple, wherever. You just need to make sure that you are wary of how much time you have and how much time you want to spend getting that episode ready. Guest communications, this is very important. You just don't want to contact a guest and ask them to be part of their interview, ask to interview them, and then not keep up communication. Don't ghost your interviewees. It's not good etiquette, and you want to make sure you update them on any subsequent podcast episodes that you have so that they stay interested in what you are and what you stand for as the first team. Audio equipment and quality. This is very important. I learned this lesson the hard way. So, when using audio equipment, make sure it records not only your voice, but your interviewee's voice as well. So you do not have to contact that person in a hurry and say, hello, I'm very sorry, our audio did not record, I'm very sorry, please. Make sure your audio equipment works. Make sure you can hear the person. I cannot stress that enough. Quality assurance. Quality assurance is very important. Have a friend, parent, other teammate view your podcast before you post it to make sure you didn't leave in 30 seconds of silence or a garbled conversation that you forgot to cut out or your audio didn't work. Just anything you can do to make sure that episode is the best that it can be. Not taking pictures with your guests. This is not only important for you to document your outreach, but it's also important for them because they may want to remember who you are. So when they finally get the podcast episode, they're like, oh, those are the kids I interviewed with. So it's very important to have that bit of documentation to remember who you interviewed with so you can talk to judges about it. Not being prepared. So when you secure a guest, you want to make sure you have a set group of questions to ask them, whether they be a first professional, a mayor, or an engineering professional. You want to make sure you have a set of questions that is tailored to what they do. Like, for instance, you could ask, oh, Mr. Superintendent, how do you see the future of STEM education in my ISD? Or, Mr. Terry Holmes, how do you see the future of STEM in 10 years with FIRST? Or just anything that relates to them, you want to make sure you're prepared to ask those questions, and you want to make sure they are prepared for those questions. Always send your questions in advance. You do not want to keep them, you don't want to keep them on their toes all the time, ready to answer some hot topic question. Make sure they know their questions, make sure they are comfortable with their questions. Okay. What's next for our team, you may ask? So, at our next, whether you see us at our next league meet, or our qualifier, or any other event, come talk to us. We may have a little surprise for you guys. At our follow-up for more information, and you may get a feature in our new podcast episode.
So some of the sources we have for this child safety is raisingchildren.net. We, as well as cyberbullying hotline, Safe Search for Kids. Some of the sources for the history of podcasting, is from Wikipedia, as well as descript.com. So we'd like to thank them for giving us information.
Okay, that is it. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. We will take any questions that any of you have, and we wish you good luck for the 2024-2025 season. Thank you.
we have some online questions actually. I think due to time concerns, we only have time for one question. Anyone in person? I'll give priority in person. If not, we have a lot of online questions. We were wondering if you guys can join Zoom and answer those questions later. Yeah. So the first question that was asked was, what would be a good place to start podcasts for complete beginners? Would we start with smaller communities or nearby communities?
We started podcasting about, I'd say, a year and a half ago. So we basically have started from scratch. And the first thing I would recommend to you would be starting with your teammates. Start with what they do. Like Jackson, I had an interview with him about engineering, about what he does with engineering. My teammates, what they do with CAD, what they do with coding. So make sure you highlight your team and what your team does. And if you have any sister teams in your area, interview them about what they do. What does he speak about their teams? So just get started within your small community and work your way out. Like I would start with the teams and then go to the school district, go to your first volunteers, and then branch out from there. Make sure you market those episodes as well. Early marketing is very important.
All right, I think that should be all the questions for now. There's a lot more Zoom questions in Zoom chat if you guys were able to answer them. What's a good contact information in case anyone from the online attendees or in-person attendees to reach you guys?
Okay, so our Instagram is 20325_maximum_resistance, or you can email us at 20325maximumresistance@gmail.com. I will put those in the chat and I'll try to highlight them as best I can. Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay, I will email that.
Thank you so much.
All right, sounds good. Let's give another round of applause for Maximum Resistance.